4. So if I may, we'll start the meeting. And I'll ask Liz to start us off by starting the recording, if I may, because we're not being live streamed as normal, but it will be recorded. So hopefully Liz, that's done. And really a pleasure for me to welcome you all to this meeting this afternoon. As members, officers and the cabinet member, pleased to see you all. And we'll go straight into the agenda, if I may. Apologies for absence, please, Liz.
We've received apologies from Councillor Mike Day, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2 is disclosures of interest. If anybody's got any interest, now is your opportunity to declare. I'm not seeing any hands going up anywhere. So in that case, nothing to declare. Item 3 is statutory prohibition of whip votes and declaration of party whips. Item 4 is the minutes of a previous meeting. Members will have had the opportunity to have had a look at them and go through them together with the letters as well. So if anybody got any comments, if not, perhaps somebody like to propose they be accepted then, please. Thank you, Wendy. Seconded, Joy. Everybody happy with that? Okay, thank you. That moves us on to item 6, which is public question time. I suspect we haven't got any.
No, we haven't, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Pardon?
Yes.
You never know. It might happen. Which moves us on very quickly to item 7, which is the presentation and briefing on supported living for young people. And I'm not sure who's going to take this first of all. Do you want to say anything first of all, Louise?
No, happy for, I don't know if Helen or Julie's in the room, happy for them to go through the presentation. That's great, thank you.
I usually get caught by not offering it to her first of all.
Don't worry, it's fine.
And when I do, you don't want to know.
I think I'm taking the next one, but yeah, happy for Helen.
Okay. In that case, who's going to take us through it?
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share the presentation first, so bear with me. Sorry, bear with me. Lovely. Yes, you can see it because I can see it on the screen. So, so thanks everybody. We've Amy and I have been asked to speak to you today just to give an update in terms of supported accommodation for young people leaving care. So I'm going to start the presentation and just talk through our current situation and what it currently looks like, some of the changes that we have already started to make, and then Amy is going to talk a little bit about our youth homeless prevention team. That's a very good idea. Okay, I'm hoping that's, there we are, fantastic. And now everybody's in my, yay, brilliant. Okay, let's see if this works. No, where's that not working? There we go. Sorry, not very good technically, clearly. Okay, so the current situation for any young people experiencing youth homelessness, age between 16 and 21, they currently access support through our supported accommodation pathway, which is commonly known as SAP. Our SAP panel consists of Child and Family Services, so I chair it, and Amy's team generally are the team that sit on it and provide the referrals for young people. We also have representation from Housing Options on that panel, who also make referrals into the same providers. We've got 3 main providers, so Pobl Llanau and Bernardo's are our key main providers as it stands at the moment. So as I've already stated, the referrals come through from Child and Family Services and from Housing Options. We complete what is called a common referral form. So basically that's providing information about the young person, the reason that they're in need of accommodation, and it enables providers then to consider the needs, potential concerns that that young person may pose and make a decision as to whether they would be able to offer an assessment to that young person. If they feel that it is appropriate for them to do so and they have space available, they will then undertake an assessment with that young person to determine that the fit, I guess, is right for that provision.
Sorry, and if they haven't? If they
haven't got, so some will hold waiting lists and will enable us to work with them up to the point at which a space may become available. Some aren't in a position to do that but quite often young people might be there for a longer period of time. So if there's an emergency situation, we have emergency provision, but most of the young people that are going through this process were able to do that in a little bit more of a planned way. So they may have accommodation that's going to be coming to an end at some point in the near future. So we need to identify a provision for them to move on to, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're in an emergency situation. Okay.
Helen, could I just ask, what's the stage before the assessment? Are they homeless? Are they on the street? Are they in bed and breakfast?
So because it's 16 to 21-year-olds, usually it would be family breakdown that might be an issue. So it could be that they're living within their family home or with family or friends. Some of them may be spending time with friends but don't have anything stable in terms of their accommodation. So Amy's team will undertake an assessment of those young people and will understand their situation. So if it's an emergency, as in they turn up to the office at 4 o'clock and they've got absolutely nowhere to go, then we would look at emergency accommodation for that young person overnight. This process generally, though, enables us to undertake a bit of an assessment, understand that young person, and be able to make decisions, hopefully, in a more planned way, knowing that they've got accommodation in the immediacy.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's just not suitable. Yes. So Julie's just highlighting that accommodation isn't suitable and therefore we need to look for an alternative. Okay, so this slide is just highlighting the current demand. It's just to give you an indication, really, and it's a snapshot in time. So it's just an indication in terms of the referrals that the teams get in relation to youth homelessness. So between April.
Sorry. Oh, go on. Sorry.
Yeah.
I got a question after you finish that.
After I finish this, okay. So between April 23 and March 24, there were 51 referrals through our SAP process. So the breakdown of that is 27 of them were looked after children or care leavers. 16 of them were youth homeless. So that means they wouldn't have necessarily been known to our services, but they present as requiring accommodation. And 7 of them were open in terms of being a child in need of care and support. So they were known to our service. Between April 24 and December 24, there were 71 referrals. So the indication is that we are getting more young people coming through in relation to youth homelessness. So, do you want to jump in?
That's why I had the question, in fact, because if you look April to March, which is basically 9 months, you're looking at an average of 4 per month. And if you look at the April to December 24 ones, you're looking at, sorry, the 12-month one on the first one with 51 referrals, about 4. The second is 9 months for 71 referrals, is 8. So it's almost double the number coming forward, or rate of them coming forward. Does that make sense? Any particular reason for that?
I don't think we know, do we? Amy, is that fair to say? No, I don't know that we can definitely say the reason. Go on.
Sorry, what I was wondering really, whether there was a concerning trend in that respect beginning to appear. Obviously, you monitor that now, I guess, and seem to see what that happens in respect to that, and see if we can find causes behind it then.
Yes. So I guess what is probably important to note is we haven't, so prior to July last year, our youth homelessness service, Amy will talk a little bit more about this towards the end of the presentation, but our youth homelessness service was sitting outside of Child and Family. we were commissioning that service out. So in terms of the data that was coming through, we perhaps didn't have a really clear picture in terms of that data. So what we're trying to do now is collate that so that we can identify, are we seeing an upward trajectory in terms of young people coming through? Did you want to ask something?
Just for my benefit and perhaps the other members as well. We've now taken bays in-house. Is this part of that procedure, these figures that are changing, or we're seeing the need for the department to do more, whereas you could really almost say hand them over to bays and say sort them out?
So bays is an internal service. It's
No,
a service that
But it used to be out external.
yeah, that how many years ago was that? That's
Sorry?
The care leavers element was brought in-house a couple of years ago, was it? Or was it longer than that now? I've lost track. 3 years ago? So bays as a service has been in existence for at least 5 years, because I've been here 5 years. And that, but what wasn't part of that then was the care leaver element, and that, as you quite rightly say, that was delivered by Bernardo's, the Young Persons Advisors Service. We brought that in-house 2 to 3 years ago. 3 years ago, in my lifetime I've been here, we brought that in-house from Bernardo's. So that's then been added to the bays service that Amy oversees, and that's part of Helen's area. And then in the last few months, we've brought in-house from Bernardo's the youth homelessness service that was also commissioned to Bernardo's. Does that make sense? I think, well, Amy can explain that. I think you're going to go on to that, and we can go through that on the subsequent slides. But in very short terms, it offers a much more enhanced outcome focused service to young people.
Sorry, I'm running ahead now, my apologies.
You're keen, and that's okay. Okay, so in terms of, just to give an indication, I guess, and this may answer some of your query in respect of the factors that we're identifying that are associated with young people that are presenting as homeless. So we know that there's issues around family relationships, a family breakdown. In terms of the individual presentations, there may be issues in relation to substance use, alcohol, drug use, involvement with criminal justice system and service, some young people with learning difficulties and some with physical disabilities as well. So we're trying to capture as much information as we can to understand the young people that are presenting. So I guess what we wanted to highlight is we are making some changes to the current process, and just to sort of clarify our thinking and our reasoning in respect of that. So we recognise that the current process can bring some challenges. So what we're identifying is that can create some choices in terms of our providers. So what happens is we will use the panel to consider all of the young people that might be in need of accommodation. And this might mean that providers will be able to determine who they feel would be most appropriate. And some of our young people therefore may miss out in terms of what they would hope to be able to access. What we also found is we undertake a referral form. We provide as much information as we can in that to help providers make informed decisions. But our providers, understandably to a degree, also want to undertake their own assessments. So looking at that from a young person's perspective, there's quite a number of assessments that they could potentially be going through, having similar questions asked of them. We have a limited number of providers as it stands right now, and that means a limited number of spaces. When we're looking at the numbers of young people coming through, that's been a bit of a challenge for us. And what that has meant is we have ended up having to maybe consider alternative providers where there's a cost for us as a local authority because we're having to spot purchase those provisions. And the other issue that is a significant issue and is probably going to remain an issue is the move on options for young people. So we might be able to access accommodation through our process, but enabling them then to move on, particularly into adulthood, there are pressures within our adult provisions as well. And this can be a challenge in terms of the flow through for young people. So we've done quite a bit of work to think about some of the solutions to this, and we've worked really closely with our providers. So we started by having conversations around the assessment element to try to understand, could we identify one assessment process that would suit everybody's needs and enable the young person to only go through that process once. We've had some really positive feedback from providers actually, and we have been able to develop, albeit it's very early days, we have been able to develop one assessment process that we are hoping over the next couple of months to start to test out. Our best hope would be that following that assessment, we would be able to determine the right provision for that young person from the people that know that young person best. We're looking to bring the SAP panel process to an end and to just contact the relevant providers in order to have those one-to-one discussions really about individual young people. That brings the process a little bit more in line with what we already do when we're looking at sort of residential provisions and fostering provisions. It is slightly different, but we're hoping that the process will align. We obviously value our providers, and it is really important that we continue to work alongside them. So our intention would be to set up a provider forum on a monthly basis to enable us to continue to meet with them face to face, to talk about any themes, any issues that may arise, and to identify if they are, I guess, if there are young people in their provisions and there may be some concerns about that breaking down, that we can know about that at the earliest possible opportunity so we can provide some additional support. And we've been working over the last few months on the development of a supported accommodation framework. So we are coming to the end of that process now. I'm really pleased to say, because it has been quite a long process. On the framework, we have around about 16 providers now, which is significantly more than what we've been working with over the last few years. So that's really positive, and it really evidences that there is a commitment to this area of work and that we want to be able to identify the right provisions for young people when they need it. So we are, as I say, we're coming to the end of that process. We're hoping that we will be able to start calling off the framework around April time. That's what we're sort of working towards. So coming out of the current SAP process and moving towards that in the very near future. So I'm just going to pass over to Amy, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about the Youth Homeless Prevention Service.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask, what's this accommodation? I realise it's emergency accommodation. What does it look like for a 16 to 25-year-old?
So some of it is emergency. It's not all emergency accommodation. So we would have some access to that on the basis that we do have a small number, but we do have some young people that will turn up in crisis and will need that accommodation. But the framework covers a wider range than that. So you've got your emergency, you've got maybe got some temporary accommodation in there. So that could be sort of an accommodation where there are a number of young people living there, 5 young people, 7 young people, whatever that looks like in terms of what the provider can offer. Those provisions would have some staffing element to it. So obviously it's not a care situation, but it is about supporting those young people. And our ask and our expectation of those providers is that they support those young people to develop the skills that they need for independent living in order that they would then be able to move on in the future, hopefully to be able to live alone and have their own provision some part down the line. So they're supported. We also have supported lodgings, so where young people might require a bit of additional support to that and a smaller, more family orientated environment. So we have access to that. And we also have access to training flats, which are short stay provisions for young people, again, to build their independent living skills in order for them to be able to move on. So some of the providers also have what they determine to be managed properties. So they have their own natural move on from the supported accommodation. But those are few in number, I would suggest, at the moment. So we're hoping that, potentially that might be able to develop as time moves on. I hope that answers your question.
So would they, in that case, would an effort be made to keep these young people away, perhaps from, shall we say, the older homeless people, or would they sometimes find themselves integrated with them?
So these provisions are generally 16 to 21, 16 to 24, 25. So we are talking about our young people and our younger cohort. And that's what we want to try to avoid. It's really challenging, and particularly when young people turn, into adulthood, turn 18, it is really challenging for the wider housing situation at the moment. So the hope is that this will enable us to keep our younger cohort of homeless young people together with the support that they need.
And what would the perfect time scale from when they come in as emergency or whatever to, you talked about moving on, and I understand some of it is blocked for all sorts of reasons. Do you have an idea as to what the perfect time scale would be?
Oh, there's a question. Perfect timescales. I don't know what that is. I mean, I don't know whether you've got a view on that, Amy.
So it's usually up to 2 years. But obviously it's needs led. So if a young person is there for 4 months and you have a review when they're doing really well and they're ready for move on, the provider would decide to put them on a move on strategy. So it depends on the young person, but generally we kind of say up to 2 years.
Kevin, you got a question?
Yes, please. Thank you. Hello, Helen, Amy. If someone was to ask us as local community councillors for help, how would we get hold of those details? Either telephone, email? Does it operate 24 hours a day, including weekends?
So we our homeless team have a duty number and an email, or our intake team, so our Spock, yeah, our Spock team can send referrals over. It isn't 24 hours, but we have our emergency duty team out of hours, which would obviously deal with a crisis situation and hand it back to us the next morning then.
Okay, Kev?
We get so hold of some of those details in case somebody asks us the question.
Yeah, I don't know who I need to send those to, but yeah, that's fine. I can pass one.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Floor's yours again.
Okay, yeah, so as you say, the Bay's service is quite a large team. There's a team of around 40 workers, and that's made up of social workers, leaving care workers, support workers, and this housing prevention service, which is new to us. So we previously had 2 housing workers in the team who carried out statutory work, and then as of July last year, Bernardo's were running our prevention service. They've integrated with the Bay service now and are managed by us. So how we worked previously was anything that was prevention, maybe kind of mediation to keep young people at home, things to prevent homelessness then were carried out by Bernardo's. And when a young person got to the point where they were homeless or they needed accommodation, they then kind of step up to the housing workers in my team. So that's all done within that team now. So the team is led by our homeless prevention coordinator, Molly. So she supervises the small team of housing workers, and we've got the 3 housing support workers who were previously part of our team anyway. And then we've got 2 eviction and family mediation workers, so that they will work with young people at risk of being evicted from somewhere, or obviously the mediation is to try and keep young people with families, because we recognise that supported accommodation is always the best outcome for young people kind of 16 to 21, so that they kind of trying to maintain young people in their current accommodation if that's appropriate and safe. And then we've got a schools worker who works with kind of year 9, 10, 11 in comprehensive schools. He goes out and does like pastoral lessons in the schools. I think he's in every school in Swansea now, which he wasn't previously. He's also working with the colleges and youth clubs as well. He's started going, so it's half term this week, so he'll be in youth clubs rather than schools. But he does work around kind of preventing arguments at home, understanding youth homelessness, what it means. I think sometimes it can be, young people can think it's a way to have no rules and to kind of go in accommodation and live their own life. And so he gives the reality of what youth homeless means and what the risks are. and also obviously advising young people of how they access support should they need it. We've got, so Housing Options have got 2 or 1.5 workers that work specifically with the younger adults, so kind of 18 to 25, and we've got really close links with those workers, which just means that we can make them aware of young people coming up to 18 before it happens, really. And by having those 2 workers, they have better working relationships with this team rather than young people our age being dealt with by anybody in Housing Options. Yeah, so the focus, is always to prevent homelessness. Obviously, that's why we've been in the jobs and to try and support families and staying together. It's not very often you have a 16, 17, 18 or 19-year-old that's ready to kind of live independently or in supported accommodation. So our aim, as long as it's appropriate and safe, is to prevent young people to stay with their families. So we do quite a lot of mediation work, linking with kind of welfare rights to make sure families, obviously there's lots of strain on families, lots of reasons why young people kind of become homeless, but just making sure that we maximise the benefits, that we're helping families stay together. When there is a need for accommodation, we try to prioritise our care leavers. So obviously they are young people that usually are not living within the family home. They're in a residential or foster placement, and it's obviously those arrangements end, other than a foster placement that turns to when I'm ready. But those arrangements generally end by the time they're 18, and they're usually not ready to be living completely independently. So we try and prioritise that cohort for our supported accommodation. Yeah, so lots of partnership working to support young people. We have monthly meetings with partner agencies and agencies like our youth offending service and early kind of adolescence services to try and identify young people earlier on, so that we're not getting to that crisis point where we've got somebody presenting as homeless and in crisis. Service development will see young people take a lead role. So it's taken a little while, but we've managed to set up a young person's kind of youth forum. So the new assessment that Helen spoke about has been co-developed with young people. We kind of developed something, and then young people have taken a look at it and give us some different ideas and changed our form. And they've given lots of feedback on so they're a mixture of young people that maybe are going to go into supported accommodation, but also some that have been through it. So they give us lots of ideas of what hasn't worked so well and what, how they felt going through that process. That's, they're valuable, really. Funding, yeah, so we've got confirmation the funding will stay in place for us to carry on this service and carry on to develop it. And so they come into the authority last July, and there's been lots of access to kind of training that they maybe wouldn't have had with Bernardo's, and our kind of corporate training things, and trying to train them so we're all working in the same way within the wider service.
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple of hands up at the moment. Sue, first of all, and then Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered, one school worker to work with all the modern secondary schools and the college. Is there plans to extend that role? It seems a huge situation for him to deal with.
I think not at the moment. There's not a plan to have any more of those workers, but although he's linked in with all those schools, there may be 1 or 2 sessions a year, maybe going in once a term to each school to do a kind of 1 or 2 hour session with a year group. So he does large groups at a time. So he does fit it all in, and he goes out to do some promotion for the team and stuff as well. So at the moment, touch wood, he's managing that, and has managed to get into school. Has really, really good feedback from school. So most young people, the feedback he receives after every session is kind of 98-99% young people found it interesting, learned something new. He's doing really well, but yeah, he manages that. It does sound a lot, doesn't it?
Well, all these children go through that system, so it seems a really onerous task for him to get through to all of them. There we are. Thank you.
Mark?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, similar question to Susan's. The school support worker, do they present an element of educational needs, like basic maths or basic English communication, or is it a bit too much it sounds to me as if it's too much, and if not, do they have other options for providing this this education? Thank you.
For the young people, you mean, the
Yes.
kind of maths and yeah, so this is just a kind of an hour or two session specifically on youth homeless, and obviously they're in school or college for that support, but this worker is a qualified teacher as well, so has the skills to provide those, and the school staff join in those sessions, so they part of those sessions with him as well. So obviously any needs are identified, school would take that forward then in supporting those young people.
Right, so they're part of the classroom activities then, on the most part.
Yeah, so it's just a kind of once a term session, like a school assembly type setup, I suppose, where the year group will come together and he kind of does a presentation with them and some activities.
Okay, thanks, Amy.
Okay, thank you. Just a matter of interest, obviously we're talking child and family services, but you're talking young people from 16 to 25. So how effective is the interface and the cooperation between yourselves and adult social services in that respect? Because we have seen evidence, or in the past, or it's not always been as smooth a transition from one to the other. Where are we with that at the moment?
Amy might add to this, but just in terms of housing options, we're actually working quite closely with housing options. We have two, as Amy said, 1.5 workers who are specifically connected to the youth homelessness service, and the aim has always been to try to make that transition as smooth as possible. The difficulty is what provision is actually available. So in terms of the relationship that we have, I would argue, I don't think Amy's going to say any different, that's actually really positive, and that we do have buy-in in the monthly meetings that Amy was just referring to. They attend, they're part of, they're open, they've actually been part of supporting our planning around the framework. So that relationship is definitely there. It's the issue is always going to be what that provision is in order to move young people on once they turn 18 and what that looks like.
In essence, as far, sorry, do you want to come in, Julie? In essence, as far as this committee is concerned, we haven't looked at this for some time, I must admit, in that sense. And Sue will remember, I'm sure, that on one occasion, on a number of occasions, we actually went out and looked, and going back must be best part of 8 or 9 years now, at the facilities that were available. So it was some time ago. And you're obviously saying initially that you're very short of providers. Hopefully you've got a lot more now from what you were saying, I think. 2 more. Right.
So on the framework, there's up to 16. I guess we're very early days.
Fingers crossed with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but we're very early days in that. So I suppose in terms of what that looks like, that's what we're trying to identify ourselves at this moment in time. But currently 3. Yes, currently 3. Yeah. Yes,
currently 3. It's something I think that we will need to think about keeping an eye on. It's closer over the next 12 months or so, that's for sure. And perhaps we'll look at that when we put in a program together. Anybody else got any questions now for Amy or Helen while they're here? I'm not seeing any hands up. Oops, sorry, Wendy.
I haven't got a question. I'm just thinking how wonderful you were doing. There's questions bandied round you, but we understood, I did anyway, what you're doing. And I think, what more can you do with the little you got? That's all I want to say. And there are 15 schools that he has to go around, and I'm sure he could do that.
He's got incredible passion. So let me tell you, he certainly can.
I think what Wendy has said is very true. It is a difficult area, whichever way you care to look at it. And basically more power to your elbow at the end of the day, I guess. But thank you very much for the presentation. It's been very interesting. And I'm sure we'll be in touch again before that much longer, I think. Thank you. Okay, on that basis, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. If I can find my paperwork. And it's the corporate parenting board update and annual report. Are you going to present this, Louise? Yeah?
Yes, please. I really apologise for not being with you in the room. In fact, and one of the reasons why is because I have just been with our looked after young people at Borver House today on one of their corporate parenting days. So, so yeah, just thank you. Just first of all, to take the opportunity to thank all members of the corporate parenting board for their attendance and their contribution over the past year, both to our elected members and our co-opted members, the officers, and all the officers who've come to give us presentations. We've had really good attendance, and I think some really useful and interesting discussions over the past year. As I hope everybody's aware, our work with the Corporate Parenting Board is really focused around the 7 pledges, which were identified by our care experienced young people working with board members a few years ago, and then we've continued to sort of see what that means with young people. So just to recap, those are no barriers to opportunity, a good education, a good job, healthy relationships, a safe place to live, mental health, love, family and friendship, and happiness. And I'm sure you would all agree that's what we would want for our own lives, and definitely what we would want for our children's lives. And so, as you know, as corporate parents, that's really, really important. So just to run through some highlights from the report, I won't read it, as hopefully you've all had a chance to have a look at it. We had 2 days last May half term at Borver House, and again, as I said, today's just the first of two more days, and this is a residential overnight for some of the young people as well, all about team building, problem solving, and having those really important conversations about the pledges and what they mean to them, and teasing out how can we turn those pledges into actions as a council. So yeah, it's a really useful opportunity to hear our young people and to have some fun as well, and for them to meet other care experienced young people, to meet with members of the board and break down those relationships, and make sure that it help in a really fun, positive way. I was on the beach today. They were using the sand to kind of sketch out what their ideal community space would look like, and using seaweed as a climbing wall, and drawing out a football pitch and all the things that matter to them. So it was really fun. We also, a couple of meetings ago, had the chance to meet our Swansea Youth Parliament member, Nicholas, and he last week made his maiden speech in the Senedd. I've seen a clip of that, and it was absolutely fantastic. He's brilliant, and I'm really hoping to get him to do that speech for full council as well, potentially soon. He was quite keen today when I spoke to him in Borver, so that would be really good to see. We've had much better engagement, I think, this year from our health board colleagues who have been attending, and then the last meeting was a specific health focused board meeting to discuss the LAC health reviews, CAMS, and the neurodiversity pathway, diagnosis pathway. I think there is more work to do with health to ensure that our care experienced population are being better tracked and monitored through the system, and perhaps given the appropriate priority in waiting lists and with competing demands, and having awareness of the particular fragility perhaps of some of those placements that our care experienced young people are in, and how undue waiting lists for CAMS or for diagnosis and things can affect them. But yeah, so really, that's really positive, and that's definitely moving forward, which is great. We've always had excellent collaboration with education. They've got a dedicated team to support our looked after young people. They always attend the board, and again, we have specific presentations from them about issues. We have a key focus on attainment, obviously, but also how we improve the attendance, and also looking at more qualitative outcomes, if you like, in terms of how they can access alternative curriculum and things that are right for them, and looking at that good education, good job pledge in particular. In terms of residential services, we've had reports on this to this meeting before, so I won't go over that in any detail. Obviously, as you're aware, we're looking to expand our in-house residential provision, and that's moving forward with a few hiccups along the way, but it's something we're really committed to. And then there's a section there, section 7, about 16+ provision, which we've just talked about now with Helen and with Amy. So yeah, I think just to conclude, again, a really positive year, I think, with the corporate parenting boards. I think it is really great to have those young people's voices at the centre of our conversations. And I know we've got members of the board on the panel here as well, so might have some comments to make. So I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Louise. I'm going to throw it open at the moment to the members. Anybody got any questions? Any hands going up? I can't see any. Oh. Okay. Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to offer some comments in that some officers attended a national corporate parenting event. I think it was in Cardiff last week. It was when I was on leave. And it's the first time we've been to such an event. I think we're going to try and go to them regularly, because what we discovered in terms of Swansea's position is actually they were seen as examples of really good practice, particularly in terms of engaging and involving children and people, our pledge work, how we're bringing in other partner agencies and other services and having conversations about, well, what are you doing to help young people? You know, be more specific about how you're supporting care experience young people as opposed to the general population of young people or adults who have left care. So I think that's something that we should continue to promote and be proud of. Really, it's not to say that we're where we need to be or where we'd like to be, but certainly we were involving young people, for example, in interviewing staff in social services. They were particularly interested to learn more about that. So we're going to continue to attend that and share the good practice and also learn from others. So that I thought it was helpful. And they were really also impressed with how the young people had been to full council and presented the pledges and said to full council, well, these are our priorities and this is why these are our priorities. So just listening to young people and understanding their points of view and their view on the world. What we need to now is put that into action consistently and regularly, which I think we're now seeing evidence of that more consistently at Corporate Parenting Board, which is good. Thanks, Chair.
I agree with Julie, because where we are today, from when I first started on Corporate Parenting Board and doing all the pledges for a whole year with them, with the young people, I just think now we can say, well, we're getting there. We're not there, obviously, but going through council and seeing that progress, what they want, not what we want.
Basically, what I was going to say was, first of all, I'm very pleased to see this report. I've had to nag in the past to get it from the corporate parenting body. So,
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Pardon?
Sorry to
have in
hear
the
that.
So I'm very pleased to see it in that respect, at least in that we've got it without coming to ask for it. And obviously, it's very comprehensive. It's very interesting. I could go through a lot of questions here, to be honest. If I just start with a quick one with 4.1 on health. We've got Corporate Parenting Board continues to work closely with health professionals, etc. Regular health checks, mental health support and support for neurodevelopment disorders are being prioritised as a part of this. How do you begin to monitor that?
Yeah, good question, really, and I think that's something I alluded to in my presentation. And we did have a good session with health in our last meeting, where we had presentations on those three issues. And I think safe to say some areas are doing better than others. I think obviously in terms of mental health and in terms of the neurodevelopmental diagnoses, they're a huge weight in this. There's huge pressure. They've got lots of priorities. But there is more to do, and we did sort of challenge a little bit and push back on how are you making sure that our looked after children are being getting the right treatment, the right whatever they need at the right time. So it is hard to monitor, but I think as I say that awareness is definitely improving, and health colleagues are coming to the meetings more regularly and are able to chip in and are able to hear about the other discussions that we're having and how that makes sense. Julia, would you agree with that? I hope.
Yeah, absolutely, Louise. I mean, the one thing we can definitely monitor is the fulfilment of the statutory duty about looked after children's health reviews, because that data was shared, and that's transparent. What we have no visibility over is because there is no dedicated pathway for care experienced children and people in relation to CAMS and neurodiversity. So that's something we're going to continue to challenge. And we raised that at the last Corporate Parenting Board, and I think it's something that would be beneficial for the relevant health minister to consider, because it's something that in other parts of the UK they are prioritised to access those services. So I think it's something we should continue to raise and challenge and scrutinise, most definitely.
Okay, just move down a couple of paragraphs to 4.3. You know what you're talking about. I'm not absolutely sure. The role of the LAC nurse. Is it just one LAC nurse or is there a number of LAC nurses? Because if there's only one, workload must be huge.
There's a team, but I can't tell you how many there are in the team, but there is a team, and they work across the region because obviously they cover MPT, local authority area as well, but I don't know. But we do have an identified point of contact within that team for Swansea looked after children.
And I think also they also have a role of looked after children from elsewhere that are in our health board area and vice versa. Some of our young people that are outside of Swansea, I think they made the point that they also support, you know, following them up as well. So it is a big workload. It is a big job.
Just a matter of interest, what does that health assessment actually involve?
It's a bit like if you go to see your GP for an annual health check. So there are basic things that we should ensure that they've got a dentist and they're having their teeth checked, and then general health measurements, does weight and eyesight, and if they have any. So, for example, if they should be asking questions as emotional well-being and mental health, and then thinking about are they accessing those services and should be able to link into that. I mean, that's something we raised a corporate parenting board about. Is the LAC health nurse linking into other parts of the health board system? So it's sort of general health, but also if they have any specific needs, so the children have a range of different needs, and are they accessing the right support?
Because what have we got at the moment? About 500 looked after?
488 as of the end of January.
Right. I wasn't too far off.
No.
Basically, I've got a figure of 550 there with what's in Swansea and what's not in Swansea, etc. Okay. So what are we looking at? 10 assessments a week?
Well, it depends on when they come into care, because they need an initial health assessment. I think it's within 20 working days. And then they're then scheduled, is it twice a year? Annual health assessments. And also it depends on the age of the child, because if it's a baby, their health assessment look quite different, and that probably be picked up by the health visitor or the midwife. So it just depends on the age of the child and when they come into care.
So they are health workers rather than social workers?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And in terms of if they've been completed, the child's looked after statutory review process, the LAC health nurse feeds into that, don't they? So we can monitor it that way as well if we need to.
There's quite a bit of fluctuation in that graph, which although it only covers 6 months, to be fair.
And I think the other thing to say, Chair, about that graph is it will include non-Swansea children, because there'll be children who are looked after who live in Swansea, but they're not our Swansea looked after children. So that's something that we've asked for them to split out next time around, so we can be clear about our children.
Okay. Can I move on to education as well then, please? If I look at the graph on 5.8, because I like to look at these trends, don't I? On page 23, sorry. The graph seems to be heading down in the wrong directions in some respects, in terms of the LAC children compared with the Swansea overall performance. Are you seeing that the same as I do? The LAC primary is reducing attendance, particularly we're talking about there, I guess, and that must impact on educational.
Yeah, I think it is something that we're aware of and have talked about in the board. It's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because obviously, you know, our looked after young people maybe have different needs. Some of them may have a ALN, some of them are being educated other than at school and things like that. So it's not a very clear picture, and they are quite a small population compared to the whole school. So, you know, one or two with poor attendance might skew the picture somewhat, if you see what I mean. So yeah, it's a difficult one, but it's something that we definitely need to monitor, because we know how important attendance is. Julie, do you want to come in at all further on that one?
Yeah, it's conversations I'm myself and other senior managers such as Amy and Helen are regularly having with education colleagues, either about individual children or about specific groups of children, about attendance, whether they're in school full time, or how we can best meet their education needs when they actually come into care or need to move placements. So we're doing a lot of positive work with education around how we can help schools to support children in the best way possible so that they want to engage in education positively or engage in learning positively. So it's an ongoing dialogue that we continue to have with education and schools.
Schools are doing a lot with attendance at the minute because governors now are responsible. They got a identified governor responsible for attendance, and these things I know are discussed in the school that I'm governor on.
Yeah, I definitely think post-COVID attendance has become a big issue for all schools, all pupils. It definitely is in two schools that I'm a governor at, for example. So yeah, I think it's definitely something we're looking at on in the round, really.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's very common. It's the same with the two schools that I'm involved with as well. We're not back to where we were before COVID, but that's another story. If I can move down to the table on 511 just for a minute, because in essence, as I understand it, every councillor, every officer is a corporate parent, and we have a role in that respect to monitor performance. The performance there, but doesn't look particularly developing. It's pretty flat generally across a piece, and if you look at some of the figures there, comparing with 2019, a number of them are down, one or two are up. Just the one is up, I think, in literacy, but otherwise they're all down. Any reason for this?
I'm happy to come in, Chair. I think what the main reason that we're aware of is the re-engagement in education for some children, particularly those that have their life to date has been built around experiencing trauma, and so that's made it more difficult for them to re-engage in learning and education. Sorry, no, well, they would have done, but then I think that was exacerbated during the years of COVID in terms of isolation and their worlds. Everybody's world was turned upside down, I believe. Well, we all experienced it, but it all had impacted on individuals in very different ways. And for those children that have had a lot of trauma in their lives to date, that would have been something that's taken longer for them to recover from. And that's why it's been important for us as a service to think about not only how we support children and the adults that care for them, but also how other agencies such as schools and how they might need to think about educating them differently or offering education in a different way. And it's taken longer for some children to re-engage in learning, or we're working closely with education about, well, maybe the learning offer needs to be more bespoke or different for some children. And that's the journey that we're on with education and schools about what that could look like so that we have more children engaged and re-engaged in learning. So that, I think for us, that's been our experiences of what's the lag there, or the difference, or the dip.
And same as the point I made about attendance, you know, it, as it says in there, it's only 0.76 of the entire secondary school population are looked after. So these are quite small numbers, and if one or two, you know, underperform relatively for whatever reasons, potentially very good reasons, as Julie's just described, that's going to skew the figures somewhat. So it is difficult to draw those comparisons, but it's, you know, it's definitely something that we need to address, the attainment gap, and making sure that our looked after children have the best possible outcomes.
One last point from me now, and then I'll be a bit quiet again. But basically, I remember vividly about 5 or 6 years back, it must have been now, when we did a comparison between results at year 6 and year 11, and there was a marked deterioration in year 11 compared with year 6. Are we doing that comparison these days? If we aren't, why not? And if we are, can we see the figures, please?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. Julie might be able to say, but it might, maybe not, because of the testing. We don't do SATs anymore in year 6, and there's different sort of national testing going on. We might not have that data, but I don't know if
you're right, Louise. It's that the data that's been, the system has changed, but also the data collection methodology has changed. So it's I've asked education colleagues these questions before, and that's been the response.
But surely we will be looking at the overall results that are coming out in terms of, I don't know what, I'm not so familiar these days, whether it's GCSEs or whatever, O-levels, whatever, all right? We surely got that data that you can compare for looked after children compared with the normal population as well. And look how good it is compared with how well they were doing, those same children might have been doing 5 years back when they were in primary school.
I'm not sure if we've got that comparative data, but
Not that level of detail, I don't think, is what in terms of, I mean, I'm not an expert, so I'd have to ask. We don't collect the data. It would be
do some digging and
education.
perhaps come back to you, perhaps.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely worth asking that question. We saw it, it was very marked, and I think I certainly remember it, and most members will have remembered it as well. And I think it's something that we need to keep an eye at, that we don't lose children in that sense, looked after children through the education system as they go through the secondary stage.
I guess it's also difficult because the same children might not be looked after at different points in their school career. Julie, is that correct? So we might, you know, someone who's looked after in year 6 might not be by year 11 and vice versa. So it's that's why it would make comparisons very challenging in terms of nailing that as evidence. And you're absolutely right, Louise. They may be looked after from when they're 6, but not when they're 11, and they may then the other way around as well in terms of when they're in school, because they may have returned home.
I think perhaps it is something we need to think about and see whether they can pick up trends there. Yeah.
We can speak to education colleagues and cabinet member about where they're going with their data collection to assist. Yeah.
Okay, I probably had enough to say now, haven't I? Before I get shouted at. So, anybody else got any questions now? Sorry.
I just wanted to add to that is that there is a web page that is called My Local School that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, but it does contain an awful lot of data, not specifically about looked after children, but about free school meals and all those sorts of things. And it does it on a school by school breakdown. Again, so it, you know, we can look at the 14 secondary schools in Swansea and look at the breakdown of data there.
Yes, I think the point I was making specifically, they are looked after children. They are specifically our responsibility, and we need to have the information as best we can in terms of how well they're doing in that respect. I think it's right for us to ask those questions. Yeah.
Absolutely, I'm not trying to suggest that it's not, but it's just it's a tricky one to track, but we'll see what we can do.
Well, life wouldn't be interesting if everything was easy, would it? But I suspect in child and family services, it's often not very easy, but that's another story, I guess. Yeah. Okay, I haven't got seen any hands up.
We can't hear anything online at the moment. Sorry, I don't know if anyone's saying so.
Sorry, my mistake. Once again, somebody needs to put a button in front of me to say press the button, but there we go. Having said that, what I was going to say, the last item on the agenda is the work plan. If you want to leave, you can, but we're only going to be 30 seconds anyway, I think, because there's only 1 month left. And I'm going to ask Liz to remind me exactly what's in there because I've lost that bit of paper for a second.
Chair, the next meeting is on the 1st of April, and we've got update on services for young people aged 16 plus, including youth justice, and briefing on how the virtual school works.
Yes, that's going to be quite interesting, I think. So, and
yeah, education might be able to answer some of those questions that you put to us today next time, maybe.
Okay. On that basis, anybody got anything else they want to add? If not, I will say thank you very much for your attendance. It's been really, I think, quite an interesting meeting, which they always are anyway, so I can't say any different to that, can I? But thank you for your attendance and look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.